Hi CFA Level 1 candidates, welcome back to the video lessons on ethics. I'm Gaurav Kabra from Mentors Alley. Today we will study about standard 1B, which is independence and objectivity. This substandard falls under standard 1, which is professionalism. Amongst the major requirements, the first big requirement is that you should apply your reasonable judgment whenever you are imparting any sort of professional service. By the term reasonable judgment, we never mean to say that all your judgment should be accurate, but still it should be reasonably accurate. The second requirement says that we should achieve and maintain independence and objectivity. By the term independence, we basically mean that our work should not be biased and it should not be influenced by any internal or external force. By the term objectivity, it means that we should do all our professional work after applying our professional skills as well as our reasonable judgment. Third point is fairly important because there are numerous cases based on this. It says that we should not offer and we should not even accept any gift, benefit, compensation or any kind of consideration that could compromise our own or someone else's independence and objectivity. Now it's turn to read disclosure requirements. First of all, make sure that you know the difference between disclosures and permission. Disclosure is required if you receive any gift or bonus after you have performed well for your clients. However, there is a permission requirement if you are entering into any sort of additional compensation agreement before performing for your clients. And second point says that if you have any research reports that are funded by the researched companies itself, then you have to provide disclosures. Now there are a few other considerations as well that we should know. The first being that we should create firewalls to avoid all sort of conflict of interest. That is, you should bring in controls whenever you feel that two activities in your firm are directly in conflict with each other. For example, research analysis team and investment banking team. The second point actually establishes this requirement only. It says that sometimes it may be allowed that research analyst works with investment bankers, but in case you have to make them work together, you should have all the conflicts adequately managed and disclosed. Third important requirement is that no compensation provided to analysts shall be based on the assignments received by the investment banking team. That is, investment banking team will obviously bring in revenues for the business, but if that is linked with the analyst's compensation, then this will create conflict of interest, as analysts will be required to write favorable reports all the time so that more and more revenues are brought into a firm by the investment banking team. So any compensation based on investment banking assignments are not allowed for analysts. The fourth point relates to the users of credit ratings. Credit ratings are the ratings provided to companies and their issues by different credit rating agencies. Generally, the fees paid to these rating agencies are borne by the company which is getting itself or its issues rated. So ultimately, you can find some sort of conflict of interest, or even if you can't find, you can at least sense that there could be some conflict of interest. So whenever you are using any credit rating, be mindful of the fact that potential conflict of interest could actually exist when you are using credit ratings. Fifth point says that analysts must differentiate between fact and opinion in their report. The basic purpose is that you should not show your opinion as a fact, because this will ultimately hurt your objectivity and the judgment that you have laid through your research reports. So it is always required that an analyst must differentiate between his fact and opinion and should never represent his opinion as a fact in his report. Sixth point is that there should be an environment of flat fee system for research work. Flat fee basically refers to a fee that is fixed beforehand and is not dependent on the research conclusions or the recommendations made. after the research work. This basic point exists because if fees are based on conclusions and recommendations on research reports, then why would anybody be willing to write unbiased reports? Everybody would write favorable conclusions and recommendations and earn higher fees. So any practice that relates fees with the research conclusions and recommendations are violations, and a flat fee basis is what is required in this case. The seventh point requires that whenever an analyst is going to participate in any information gathering event, he or his firm should actually pay for the commercial transport in order to avoid all the potential conflict of interest. This is the major requirement. Whatsoever, if commercial transportation is unavailable, then modest arrangement made by your client are permissible and you can take that. Now there is a very thin line of difference between modest transportation and luxurious transportation. You always have to take care that the first priority is to pay for your own commercial transport expense. The second priority is to take modest arrangements from your clients whenever there is no commercial transport available. There are some examples of gifts that are not acceptable at all. The first being any sort of gift received from your brokerage house. The scenario here is that you have your clients for whom you manage their trades, and you have a brokerage house who gets your trades done. So if you are receiving any gifts in return from a brokerage house, then that might signify your biasness towards them. So any gifts received from brokerage's house are not acceptable at all. The second point says that if you are in any sort of contract where you will get some allotment in an oversubscribed IPO, then you are violating the standard, because oversubscribed IPO itself is an IPO where investors find it difficult to get their shares allotted. And if you get that allotment, definitely you are facing some sort of conflict of interest. The third point also sets an example of unacceptable gift. If you are taking contributions for your favorite charity or political party, then that will be deemed to have taken contributions for yourself. So any sort of contribution taken which is going to affect your independence and objectivity will definitely be an unacceptable gift and cannot be taken. And the fourth point is about the stock warrants or any other equity instruments that you might get as gifts from your clients. This is not acceptable as well, because both stock warrants and equity instruments represent the ownership interest in your client's firm, and if you become owner of that firm, the independence that we are seeking for might get lost. Henceforth, any stock warrant or any other equity instrument cannot be accepted as gifts from your clients. Lastly, there are few recommendations. Yet again, I would tell you these are recommendations by the CFA Institute and these are not mandated by any law, regulations or whatsoever. The first recommendation is that you should always put your investment banking clients on a restricted list. That is, you should not write any research report for them. The second recommendation is that all the firms should place a strict value limit for the acceptable gifts. That is, some amount of gifts, for example, some dollars is the final amount of gifts that you could receive, and any gift which has a value of the value already set by the firm, then those gifts are unacceptable and could not be taken. There are lots of recommendations mixed in only this point. The first is that whenever an employee is going to participate in an IPO, he should obtain a prior approval. The second point talks about that there should be a process or there should be a procedure by which all the employees should provide a prompt disclosure of all the subsequent investment actions they have taken after an offering. And the third recommendation sets strict limits on investment personnel for accepting securities in private placements. The fourth point goes on to recommend a firm that it should establish formal written policy on independence and objectivity. And the final point requires that all firms should try to appoint a senior officer who will take care of all the compliance related to independence and objectivity. By the same time, he would also take care that the code of ethics and all the regulations concerning the business of the firms are taken care of. So this was all about this video. I hope you liked it. Please like, share and subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much.